Amy Bodkin, Special Needs Consultant at A Charlotte Mason Plenary. Today I'm going to be discussing with you Principles 16, 17, 18, and 19 from Charlotte Mason's 20 Principles. This is part of our free 20 Principles study over at A Charlotte Mason Plenary's website. If you haven't heard Rachel's video on this particular set of principles, I highly recommend you check it out. She has an amazing quote that really underscores the importance of these particular principles. I tend to break up the principles into 3 categories and view them from more of a developmental perspective. So principles 1 through 8 tend to deal more with the physical body, how we treat children as physical beings. Principles 9 through 15 tend to deal more with how we treat children as mental intelligent beings. And principles 16 through 20 tend to focus more on how we treat their spirits, them as spiritual beings or organisms. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into principles 16 and 17. 16. There are 2 guides to moral and intellectual self-management to offer to children which we may call the way of the will and the way of the reason. Principle 17. The way of the will. Children should be taught A, to distinguish between I want and I will, B, that the way to will effectively is to turn our thoughts from that which we desire, but do not will. C, that the best way to turn our thoughts is to think of or do some quite different thing, entertaining or interesting. D, that after a little rest in this way, the will returns to its work with new vigor. This adjunct of the will is familiar to us as diversion, whose office it is to ease us for a time from will effort, that we may will again, with added power. The use of suggestion as an aid to the will is to be deprecated, as tending to stultify and stereotype character. It would seem that spontaneity is a condition of development, and that human nature needs the discipline of failure as well as of success. The whole point of this principle is that we get to choose, and we don't learn how to choose well unless we get to practice choosing. And so giving our children choices so that they learn from both successes and failures and learn how to choose, that we can take a break and come back to things. Those are all the lessons that we learn from having choices. So this is about reminding us that our children should all have choices available to them. We shouldn't micromanage everything and completely run their lives, or they don't end up having that opportunity to learn those lessons and to learn from the consequences of different choices until much later when the consequences can be greater in life. Let's head on to Principle 18. The way of reason. We teach children, too, not to lean too confidently to their own understanding, because the function of reason is to give logical demonstration, A, to mathematical truth, B, of an initial idea accepted by the will. In the former case, reason is practically an infallible guide, but in the latter, it is not always a safe one, for whether that idea be right or wrong, reason will confirm it by irrefragable proofs. We have to be careful not to lean too heavily on our reason, because we can reason anything. The events of the last century are a prime example. In World War II, so many decisions were justified by reason, but that didn't make them right. And there were many horrific things that were reasoned as being perfectly acceptable. And that's one of the things that our children learn eventually as they're making decisions. Children make decisions very early on in their lives. Small ones, but they're still making decisions. But as far as understanding that reason is a good servant but a poor master, that comes a little bit later as we're dealing with more complex decisions than the simple ones of, I want something to drink. But it's a very important lesson to learn, and it's very relevant to special needs children. In World War II, many special needs lives were terminated because Their bodies or their minds were not what people thought of as being correct. And without seeing the spirit or soul of a person, that part of them that's not their body and not their mind, what keeps you from doing that? And then let's head on to principle 19. Therefore, children should be taught, as they become mature enough to understand such teaching, that the chief responsibility which rests on them as persons is the acceptance or rejection of ideas. To help them in this choice, we give them principles of conduct and a wide range of the knowledge fitted to them. These principles should save children from some of the loose thinking and heedless action which cause most of us to live at a lower level than we need. One of the things I want to point out is that she states in this principle that children should be taught as they become mature enough. And that's really important. There are some really dark things in our history and in human nature and in the world that is around us currently. And children are not ready for that when they are young or when they're developmentally young. Most of the time, children's brains tend to protect them from the things that they're not ready for. But when we have children who are developmentally asynchronous, their brains do not always protect them from that. And exposing them to some of the scarier things in this world can really cause trauma when they're small, because they're seeing it from a very different perspective that they're really not ready to view it from. There's a lot of special needs adults, especially autistic adults, tend to have a lot of trauma associated from experiences with religion, for example, because sometimes we will expose children to different ideas and stories that, when we really sit down and think of them, are rather scary. When I was a child, my mom taught me the story of the 10 plagues in Egypt from the Bible. I was like, hold on a second. I'm the firstborn. Do we still do this? Because that is not cool. So we've got to really think about if they're ready to hear some of these lessons. They will still be there when they are ready for them. These lessons will. Take it one step at a time. You don't need to know everything. You just need to have the opportunities and relationships presented to you as you are ready. And the one piece of advice that I tend to give people with regards to a lot of these principles that are based more on kind of the soul or spirit of a child is encouraging families to focus on not so much knowledge, but holidays and stories of character, preferably that aren't scary. And focus on those things, because those things are things that we're ready for when we're smaller. And then as we get bigger, then we are able to look at more abstract concepts, more difficult concepts, stories that involve a little bit more maturity. Make sure that you click the bell and subscribe to the Plenary YouTube channel so you get notified as each new video comes out. And then I will see you guys next time when we discuss the last principle, Principle 20. Thanks for joining me.